The biggest the biggest thing is about how our working conditions are getting worse and worse, and that's because we can't recruit doctors and we can't retain doctors, and we've seen that our pay has just been eroded, and it's really come home to roost with the cost of living crisis. We see that we're now paid 40% less than we were in 2008, and yet we're not doing 40% less work, and we're not doing work that's a 40% less value. And we just simply are running to the ground. We gave our all, we've always given our all, and we're on our knees through COVID, and things have just come to a head. And we just want the government to honestly negotiate with us. And our BMA have been asking for honest negotiations for months and for years, and it's got to the point now where we have a supermajority ballot with 9 out of 10 doctors voting for industrial action to just try and get the government to honestly come to the table and negotiate to improve our lot and to stem the hemorrhage of staff from the NHS.
And you mentioned about working conditions. Could you give me an idea of how difficult things are sometimes in York Hospital and the things you're having to face?
Well, it's not just York Hospital, that's the thing. It's nationwide and across the 4 nations in terms of how we do not just our own job, but the job of the vacancies, and the job now of vacancies across all types of staff, where we pick up the work of nurses that aren't in post, of short staffing in the pharmacy team, of relentless increase in workload really, and pressures on demand. The waiting list is the highest it's been, I think, in living memory to my knowledge. 7.5 million now waiting for an appointment or a procedure, and that is extremely stressful for us all, and we have nothing more that we can give or to make in terms of more productivity. We do our very best, but it's still not enough.
And how would you sort of sum up the feelings of doctors like yourself? What are the emotions that you're feeling at the moment?
Well, I feel really very hopeless, I think, if I'm honest, in terms of what will the future be. How can it carry on when it's at an unsustainable level of crisis management? And who will be there to look after my wife and I when we start to be ill in the decade or 2 decades time as we age? And who will be alongside me as I try and keep working until retirement?
And how do you see the future of the NHS if things don't change?
I think it's finished. I think it's burst, in all honesty. It was bursting at the seams, but I think it's burst, is how it feels to me, in terms of the relentless pressure on it and the lack of investment in it and retention of people, and the increasing cost and complexity of healthcare. For my parents' generation, the baby boomers that are old and ill, we're able to keep them alive in a way that my grandparents and my great-grandparents couldn't be. But we keep them alive and they're unwell for a decade or more, with collecting more and more illnesses that we can treat but can't cure, and that's really complex to manage. And when they come into hospital in a crisis, it's really hard to juggle all those conditions around. And the same is true for me as a cancer specialist, that the patients I treat have a lot wrong with them, and yet the treatments help, but they don't cure. So my workload goes up and up every few years as a new treatment comes that helps. It's fantastic, but then it needs very expert training to be able to manage all that and to try and maximise their quality of life and their time.
And the impact on patients, I suppose, is getting more and more severe, isn't it?
Definitely. In terms of the time waiting and the stress that causes, and the lost days of working and the lost days of grandparents being able to care for their grandkids, if you like. Yeah, for sure.
And without the sort of pay rise you're asking for, do you worry that doctors will leave, doctors won't join?
They're leaving already. 10,000 doctors left the medical workforce in 2021. That's the GMC figures, not the BMAs. Half of them left to go and work abroad, and the other half left medicine. So it's not that we don't have a plug in the bath anymore. The plug's taken out and someone's kicked in the bottom. That's how it feels. And the tap is trickling in. It needed to be so many more training. It's always needed more doctors training. And now we're not only not training enough, we can't retain them. Junior doctors leave within the first few years. It's like 2/3 don't go on to a further training program. It's a nightmare. And to get to my level of expertise, it's 10 years from qualification to being at the beginnings of being of a consultant in cancer medicine. They're never going to be ready before I retire, So I'm stuck with never having enough workforce until I retire. I know that. But the problem is that, I'm one of the oldest consultants in the hospital because people can't stay, they can't do it anymore. And the debacle over our pension has meant people have just gone when they've got years to give, So we can't, we're not training enough, we can't retain enough. And the other things, we're utterly unattractive to come and live here. Because the salary, say in the Republic of Ireland, now you start on £185,000. Can you imagine being paid that much? I'm not on that. I'm nowhere near that after 17 years as a consultant. No chance of it, And then now we've got in Scotland 17.4% pay rise for juniors over 2 years. And that'll come for consultants, I'm sure. That's just a short train ride from here. It's 2 hours by train to Edinburgh. How can we retain and recruit when it's like it is? And the thing for me is, if you don't keep the brightest and the best going into medicine to be our leaders in healthcare, the decision makers, the innovators, then there's no hope for the rest of the staff in the NHS. That's how I see it.
And other public service unions have settled for 6% or around about that, but you're not doing that. Why do you think
you
that
must
is?
be joking, 6% is below inflation. It's another pay cut. Now, if that was our first pay cut, then that would be fine. But no group has lost more pay than doctors since 2008. We're nearly 40% down in real terms. And that hurts, That's a massive loss of income for doctors. You graduate now on about £104,000 debt as a medical student. 9% interest. After 5 years, your loan has actually gone up. So you're going to end up paying back £200,000 for that. You won't pay it off before you retire. And that's unimaginable, I came from a single parent family in Hull and went to med school. That's an impossibility now. And it's just wrong to me. So yeah, absolutely 6%. I'm not settling for that. No way. Because it won't keep me in, it doesn't make my income restored, and it doesn't stop people leaving or deciding just not to do medicine or come here from abroad. Yeah, we're just not attracted to attract people from abroad, and we've always relied on international medical graduates to top up our workforce. We don't train enough. We're not attractive.
And finally, obviously there's some disruption caused by today. What's your message to patients today?
Please realise we don't do this lightly, all right? And think of the fact that in the last year we've had 2 extra bank holidays for very good reasons, and that these 2 days are just like that. It's a small impact on a massive waiting list already, and it's to say, look, enough's enough. We want to be able to do more. We want to have more colleagues. We want to be able to keep working, but we need some proper recognition and help. And that what's called the pay review body for us, this DDRB thing, is not independent. It needs to be reformed to make our pay settlement secure. I came into medicine not for the money. I knew I'd be relatively well paid, but that's gone. I'm not relatively well paid compared to a lawyer, a pilot, a financier, an MP, and it's not right.